Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rob Kamranpoor, and welcome to my third episode of RK Leadership. Today, I will be discussing one of the most important areas, if not the most important area of leadership, which is communication. So let's start off by looking at why leaders communicate. There are 3 I's to keep in mind: inform, inspire, and influence. I will talk about these 3 throughout this episode. And here are some key points about communication. Did you know that communication issues make up the top 5 list for employee dissatisfaction? I will share some of these questions with you from Gallup's Q12 survey, which some organizations use globally. Note that words have little meaning compared to other channels of communication, which comprises of words, which is 7%, tone 38%, and body language, which is 55%. We tend to believe more of what we see in action and feel in tone than that we hear in words. Good communication creates relationships. Be a storyteller. Stories stick. Facts get forgotten. When you want to convey a key point, find a story to wrap it around. And here's some roadblocks to communication. These are the reasons why most communication efforts fail. Some leaders don't know how to communicate, some leaders don't know what to communicate, and some leaders don't see communication as their job. Again, I will discuss these throughout this episode. If there's one area or skill that you should focus on and make it your number 1 priority, it should be communication. I mention this to my staff and remind them on a regular basis on the importance of how this skill, attributes to every aspect of their life. I believe that the root cause of 90% of the issues are due to poor, lack, or miscommunication. This skill is transferable in every aspect of your life. Yes, every aspect. Your career, your relationship, your marriage, your kids, your sports teams, etc. Every one-on-one that I've had with my staff, they've consistently been frustrated and had issues that have been a result of lack of communication, no communication, and not being heard or listened to. Here's some key areas that require clear communication as you lead a team. The first point I'm going to talk about is vision, goals, targets, and scorecard. You are required to communicate not only the vision of the company, for those who don't know or understand it, but your vision for the team. Every year you'll be given or need to develop goals, targets, and a scorecard for your company, department, or team, specifically dedicated to your teams. You will need to clearly understand these goals first and communicate them to your team. You will need to address these questions pertaining to these goals and how the targets are derived. Please ensure that you're transparent and honest with your team, and if you don't have the answer to the question, let them know that you'll find out and get back to them. There's no shame in that, and they will appreciate your honesty. But make sure that you do get back to them and keep your promise and lead by example. Your vision should align with your organization's vision and goals. You will need to develop a plan and articulate how we are going to achieve this. And again, make sure it's clearly understood by your team what you're pertaining to what your vision and those goals are. If you're part of a larger organization, you'll have a company scorecard. And it'll require you to develop your own for your department or your team that rolls up to the company scorecard. And again, this needs to be communicated clearly with your team at the beginning, not mid-year, not at the end of the year, where I've seen this happen, and it creates a lot of frustration for staff. There's been cases I've seen scorecards targets. Again, I've seen scorecard targets that have been miscommunicated or communicated late to staff, to certain employees, and where an employee's bonus can depend on it. And this again leads to great frustration, mistrust, disengagement, and ultimately people leaving the group, the team, the company, etc. So again, you want to avoid all that pitfall and get in front of that and make sure that your team understands and they know about these targets right off the bat. The next point I want to discuss is expectations. One thing I've learned early in my leadership career is to set out clear expectations for your team or your teams, and sometimes you need to break it down to specifics to the various roles or groups within your team. I will share a few examples on my Instagram and LinkedIn pages for you guys to look at and use as a tool. This disrupts productivity and wastes a great deal of time. It can also lead to creating fear and frustration in some people's minds. I've dealt with this in my career, and I must say it takes away focus from the goal that you're trying to achieve, and it leads to chaos at times. Therefore, in order to avoid any mishap and ensuring your team's focused at all times, is to be transparent and honest, no matter how difficult the news may be to handle. Keep in mind that being honest with people in any capacity or relationships build trust, which is very important in leadership. Always ensure that you're the first person communicating with your team about any decision or news sent down from hierarchy. That is your leaders, of course. I know many managers who kept this news away from staff, or I should say had poor communication skills, until eventually the staff found out from other teams, friends, colleagues, etc. However, there are times that you cannot communicate certain info with your team because perhaps a formal announcement is being put together and is scheduled to be, communicated with a greater group or the organization at a later date. You also need to remember that you need to build trust in every direction, not just downwards. So again, building trust upwards and across is very important as well. The next and final point is also important, which is email communication. This is an area which I'm sure everyone has experienced some frustration, anger, hurt, confusion, joy, etc. As a leader, you must set your expectations with respect to email communications. Again, I will share my set of expectations as discussed earlier and post it on my sites. A few key notes that you need to know and understand is that when it comes to emails, you cannot see the other person's expressions, body language, or emotions, and they cannot see yours. Therefore, things can be taken out of context, misunderstood by the recipient. My rule is that if you keep your emails short and to the point. If you need to write an essay, just pick up the phone and call the other person. Chances are that people will not read past the first or second paragraph anyways. If necessary, compose an email after summarizing your key points or action items with dates and send that back to the recipient in an email. My other rule is never reply to an email if you get emotional. If somebody's being disrespectful in an email and it pisses you off, simply get up and go for a walk and take a break to clear your head. I learned this earlier in my career, thank God, and I've had my mentors talk to me about this specific incident that I went through personally. So one day I was working with an individual in my organization, and this person was very difficult to work with. They had poor communication skills and not being friendly at all. And I had many projects with this individual. And one day, they sent me this email, and it was very frustrating because it kind of threw me under the bus. They threw me under the bus and CC'd, a whole bunch of people, including managers and whatnot. And, at that stage and at that point in my career, I was very emotional. I was a very driven person, and I took that personally. So I replied back with another email, kind of stooping to that level. And again, my manager pulled me aside and said, look, anytime you come across anything like this, just stop what you're doing, go for a walk, never reply back to this kind of email, because again, what you're doing is, regardless of if you're right or wrong, people are going to perceive you the same way, because there's a whole bunch of people in that email, and you're going to stoop yourself to that level, and that's how people perceive you, no matter what position you have. So again, that was a great learning experience for me, and I've applied it ever since. And I kind of teach that to all my employees, that if you come across any email like that, never respond to it. Get up and go for a walk. I don't care if you have to go downstairs, get some fresh air outside, whatever you need to do. I'll understand it, but I'd rather you do that than reply back, and then we're going to be in firefighting mode, and I don't want to do that every time. So that's something that you definitely want to keep in mind. Another rule is that you don't try to use sense of humor over email, unless you're very close with the person on the other end, and you guys are friends, etc. This can lead to people not understanding your joke or your sense of humor. If you're assigning a task to someone, state the action item or items clearly and include a due date. Very important. If you send me an email asking for me to do something and you don't have a required due date, it'll go right to the bottom of my to-do list, and the chances are I'll miss it, or someone will miss that email that might have been urgent for you. The last point I'll leave you with is to remember that the most important skill when it comes to communication is listening. Not just to prep and your rebuttal and your answer, but trying to truly understand what is being communicated. You might have heard of the term active listening, talking less, and listening more. Please practice these skills along with anything else you might have learned during this episode. That will wrap it up for this episode, and please stay tuned for my weekly videos where I'll be discussing various areas of leadership in greater detail to help you become a successful leader. I greatly appreciate your time, and please subscribe to this channel if you found it useful, and send me your comments, questions, and feedback. Remember, you don't need a title to lead, and titles don't make you a leader. Get out there and practice your leadership skills. Till next time, take care. Bye.